On the morning of September 4th, she was 12 years old, and she was walking behind her father on a trail she had walked a dozen times before. By noon, she was alone. Not lost in a park alone. Not separated out of fair alone. Alone in the Siberian taiga, 6 million square miles of dense boreal forest, swamp, and mountain where the temperature drops below freezing before September is over, and where the nearest human settlement was, depending on which direction she walked, somewhere between 40 and 90 kilometers away. Her name was Karina. She had no food. She had no compass. She had a small dog named Nida and a younger brother named Kristik, who was 4 years old and terrified, and who she would spend the next 22 days keeping alive through methods that no 12-year-old should ever have to know. And for 11 of those 22 days, no rescue team was looking for them. Not because the wilderness was too vast. Not because the weather made search impossible. Because the adults who were supposed to authorize the search believed the children were already dead. Let me tell you where Karina Chikatova was, and what that place actually means. The Republic of Sakha, also called Yakutia, occupies the northeastern corner of Russia. It is the largest federal subject in the world by area. Larger than Argentina. Larger than India. It contains within its borders the coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth, the town of Oymyakon, where temperatures have been recorded at minus 71 degrees Celsius. The village of Olam, where Karina's family lived, sits deep in the Sakha interior. It is the kind of place where the word remote stops meaning what it means anywhere else. The nearest road, not highway road, was more than 50 kilometers away. Supply runs came by helicopter when weather permitted. In winter, the river froze solid enough to drive vehicles across, which was the only reliable overland connection to the outside world. Karina grew up in this. She knew cold the way children in cities know traffic. She understood in the practical bone-deep way that rural Siberian children understood such things, that the forest was not a park. It was not a backdrop. It was a living system with its own logic, and it did not make exceptions for people who were small or frightened or 12 years old. This is important, because what she did over the next 22 days was not luck. It was not miracle. It was the specific, accumulated knowledge of a child who had been raised in a place where knowing things meant surviving them. The separation happened on a trail between Olam and a neighboring settlement where Karina's father was headed for work. Accounts differ slightly on the exact sequence. This is Russia in 2014, a rural republic where documentation of small personal disasters was not a priority, but the core of what happened is consistent across every source that covered the story. Her father walked ahead. Karina followed with Kristik and Nida. At some point on the trail, they fell behind. When they looked up, her father was gone. The trail, such as it was, had divided or faded, or she had simply taken a wrong turn through the trees. She called out. The taiga absorbed her voice the way it absorbs everything. Completely, without echo, without reply. She was 12 years old. Her brother was 4. The dog pressed against her leg. She made a decision in the next few minutes that was either instinctive or taught, and I suspect it was both. That would be the difference between 2 children dying in the forest and 2 children walking out of it. She did not panic. She did not run. She sat down in the leaves, and she thought. The first problem was water. In the Siberian taiga, in early September, water is not immediately scarce, but it is not safe to drink from standing sources, and Kristik was already asking for it. Karina found a moving stream. Moving water, she knew, was safer, and let them drink. The second problem was warmth. Temperatures in the Sakha interior dropped sharply after sunset, even in early September. By the end of the month, overnight temperatures would fall below freezing. They had the clothes they were wearing. Nothing else. Karina built a bed in the leaves. Not a metaphorical bed. She gathered dry leaves and pine needles into a pile deep enough to insulate against the ground, put Kristik in the center of it, and lay around him with Nida pressed to his other side. 3 bodies generating heat, the leaves holding it in. She had seen this done, or she had been told about it, or she had simply understood, in the way that children who grow up near real cold understand, that the ground pulls heat out of a body faster than the air does, and that you have to get off the ground. She was 12. She did this on the first night, without being taught in that moment. without anyone telling her what to do. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that was, by any measure, extraordinary. She foraged. The taiga in early September still held berries. Pine nuts, crowberries, lingonberries, and Karina knew which ones were safe because she had picked them with her mother since she was old enough to walk. She fed Kristik first. She ate what was left. She found sources of running water and returned to them daily. She kept moving during the day in a rough direction. She oriented by the sun, the way her father had shown her, east in the morning and west in the afternoon, while circling close enough to a consistent area that she wasn't compounding the problem of being found. At night, she rebuilt their leaf nest wherever they sheltered. She kept Kristik talking. She told him stories. She sang songs she remembered from school. When he cried, she let him cry and then redirected him because she had understood something that most adults take years to learn, that a 4-year-old who has cried himself out is easier to settle than one you've tried to stop mid-sob. She was managing him, consciously, strategically. She was 12.
On approximately the 5th day, Kristik's feet began to swell from walking. The improvised footwear, she had reinforced his shoes somehow, accounts are vague here, wasn't enough. The swelling was getting worse. Karina made a decision. She told Kristik to stay in the shelter. She left him Nida for warmth and company, and she went looking for help alone, covering ground faster without him, calling out, watching for smoke or light or any sign of human habitation. She found nothing that day. She came back. She tried again on different days, each time returning to her brother, a 4-year-old alone in the Siberian forest with a dog, waiting for his 12-year-old sister to come back. She always came back. Now I need to tell you what was happening outside the forest. When Karina's father arrived at the neighboring settlement without his children, the alarm was raised. A search began immediately, in the way that searches begin in remote Siberian villages, meaning on foot, by local people who knew the terrain, without the resources or communication infrastructure that a search and rescue operation would require anywhere else. They searched for several days. They found nothing. And then, somewhere in the administrative chain between the village search and the formal Russian emergency response system, the MSICHS, the Ministry of Civil Defense, Emergency Situations and Disaster Relief, a determination was made. The children had been in the forest for too long without shelter or food. Temperatures were dropping. The probability of survival was assessed as low. The formal search was suspended, not paused, suspended. For the families back in the village, this translated simply, the authorities believed the children were dead. 11 days passed. Karina was still building leaf nests, still rationing lingonberries, still telling her 4-year-old brother stories in the dark. What restarted the search was not a new piece of evidence. It was not a signal or a sighting or a discovery. It was Nida. On approximately day 11, the exact timing varies by account, somewhere between the 10th and 12th day, Karina's dog appeared at the edge of Olam village. Thin, exhausted, alone. The family understood immediately what this meant. Not that the children were dead, that the children were somewhere the dog could reach, that there was a there to reach. They called the MSICHS again. They were insistent in a way that bureaucratic urgency doesn't easily refuse. Helicopters were authorized. Search teams went back in. Nida, when she had rested and eaten, led them. The dog walked back into the forest with the searchers following her. And on the 21st day, 3 weeks to the day since the separation on the trail, a rescue team found Karina and Kristik in the taiga, weak and thin and cold and alive. Kristik was 4 years old and had spent 21 days in the Siberian wilderness with his sister as his only protection. He was dehydrated. He was malnourished. He had bruising and swelling in his feet. He was alive. Here is the part of this story that I keep coming back to. When the rescue team reached them, the first thing Karina did, according to the account reported by local Saka News and later picked up by international outlets, was ask if her dog was okay. Not if her parents were okay. Not if she was going to be okay. Not any of the things a child who has just survived 3 weeks of slow starvation in a Siberian forest might be expected to say. She asked about the dog, because in her accounting of what had kept them alive, the dog was not a companion. The dog was a team member. The dog had carried warmth for Kristik at night. The dog had been part of every survival calculation she had made for 21 days. And when the dog left, when Nida had made the decision to go for help, which is what the dog did, which is what happened, Karina understood. She did not go after her. She stayed with Kristik and she waited. She knew the dog was going to do what the dog was going to do. And she trusted it. That kind of thinking, calm, strategic, resource-aware, long horizon, is what kept 2 children alive for 3 weeks in a place where adults with full equipment have died in less than 1. She was 12. The story received significant coverage in Russia when it broke in late September 2014. International outlets picked it up shortly after. Karina was photographed, interviewed, celebrated. She became briefly famous in the specific way that survival stories produce brief fame. Intense, overwhelming, and then quietly receding as the news cycle moved on. She gave interviews. She was composed in them. She answered questions carefully, the way someone answers questions when they've had a long time in the quiet to think about what happened and what it means. She was 12 years old in those interviews. She looked like a 12-year-old. A child's face. A child's hands. And she described, in a child's matter-of-fact tone, how she had kept her brother's feet warm at night by pressing them against her stomach. Every night. For 21 nights. I want to be honest about what we don't know. The precise day-by-day account of what Karina did in that forest doesn't exist in any documentary form. What we have is her testimony, her family's testimony, reporting by Sakha regional media, and the physical evidence of 2 children who came out of the forest alive when they had no obvious right to. Some details in the international coverage were inconsistent. The exact number of days varies between 19 and 22 depending on the source. The precise geography of where they were found is not publicly documented. The internal decision-making of the MCHS regarding the search suspension was never officially explained. What is not in dispute: 2 children entered the Siberian taiga. The formal search was called off. They survived. The dog found help. They were rescued. Everything else is the reconstruction of an experience that happened to a child in a forest where no one was watching. We are trusting her account because it is the only account, and because the evidence of her survival is itself a form of corroboration. You do not come out of the Siberian taiga in late September after 3 weeks without doing something right. Many things right. Right in sequence, right under pressure, right when you were hungry and cold and responsible for someone smaller than you. She did those things. Whatever exactly they were. There is a specific kind of loneliness that the taiga produces that I don't think translates into language well. I've read accounts from researchers who've spent time in the Sakha interior, ecologists, geographers, the occasional journalist, and they describe it the same way every time. It is not the loneliness of being away from people. It is the loneliness of being somewhere that does not register your existence at all. The forest is not hostile. It is not threatening. It simply continues. It continues around you and through you, and it will continue after you with exactly the same indifference. Karina was 12 years old and she was in that for 21 days. Not hardened, not trained, not equipped. With a 4-year-old who needed her to be something she had not yet had time to become. And she became it anyway. She would be 22 or 23 years old now, living somewhere in the Republic of Sakha. Perhaps still in Olam, perhaps not. She gave interviews as a child, and I don't know what her life looks like now, and it is not my place to speculate. But there is something I keep thinking about. Every adult in that story, every person who was supposed to be responsible, supposed to be searching, supposed to be the one making decisions, failed at something. Her father lost her on a trail he knew. The search teams couldn't find her. The authorities called off the search. The system that was supposed to protect children in remote Russian territories decided, after 11 days, that these particular children were a loss to be grieved rather than a problem to be solved. And a 12-year-old girl decided differently. She did not have the authority to make that decision. She did not have the resources. She did not have the training or the equipment or the years of experience that should have been required. She had a 4-year-old brother who needed her to not give up. She had a dog. She had leaves and berries and the sun and whatever her parents had managed to teach her in 12 years about what cold really means. It was enough. It was exactly enough. And the thing that I cannot stop thinking about is this: at no point in 21 days, not when the berries ran thin, not when Kristik's feet swelled, not when she went looking alone and found nothing, not on the 11th night when the search that was supposed to be coming had already been called off, did she stop. She didn't know the search had been called off. She didn't know anyone had decided she was dead. She was just a girl in a forest, keeping her brother alive, waiting for help that, for 11 days, was not coming. And then it came, and she walked out.